So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the second GEFA Water 101 webinar. This will be on the topic of Georgia lead service line inventory and replacement. We have a lot of great information, as I mentioned, to share with you all. So we're just going to jump right in. This webinar is being recorded, and the link to the webinar will be shared in the chat, as well as you can find it on GEFA's website. That's where the link will direct you. So if anyone is missing or you want to forward this on, you can most definitely do so, but this is being recorded and shared after the webinar. My name is Alana Kinnebrew. I am the project manager at IB Environmental, and I'll be the host today for this webinar. Now, as we're getting started, I just want to do quick housekeeping for everyone. At the bottom of your screens, you will see the option for the Q&A. And so please utilize that with any of your questions. That Q&A box will be very helpful. We have a designated Q&A section for this webinar, but as you're thinking of questions while our presenters are going through their presentations, please drop them in the box. Some things we may be able to answer right away, but others we will most certainly try to address them during the Q&A session. We also have a chat feature as well. As audience members, you guys will not be able to utilize the chat. However, that is where we will share additional resources, links, registration links, things of that nature. So that way you can take advantage of that as well. And just to make sure everyone is seeing these features and noticing their bar at the bottom, there is also a raise hand feature. So show of hands. Just want to see from the audience who was able to join us for the first webinar that took place last month. You can go ahead and raise your hands. Last month's webinar, Amanda Carroll from GEFA presented on the federal requirements. And so if you were able to join us for that, go ahead and raise your hand. Let us see who all came out. Okay. I see some hands being raised. Thank you all so much for coming on back. Again, you know, we have a lot of valuable information, especially for the state of Georgia. So you can go ahead and lower your hand. And without further ado, as you can see, we have our first speaker who is ready to jump on in, Lisa Golphin. She is a project manager at GEFA with over 20 years of experience in the water industry. Today, she's going to dive in and share more information about GEFA funding and how it relates to lead service line inventory and replacement projects. So Lisa, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Alana. I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
Great, we can see your screen. Good afternoon.
Can everyone see it? All right, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Golphin. As Alana stated, I'm here, project manager here at GEFA, and I'm excited to be working with a lot of Georgia communities, especially with lead service line inventory and lead service line replacement projects, which what we will be discussing today. I want to thank you for joining our second series of the Water 101 webinars. And if you missed the first one on federal requirements of the state revolving fund, I strongly encourage you to go to our website at gefa.georgia.gov under the water resources section, and then to go to water and sewer financing to hear the latest about the Davis-Bacon wages, Build American, Buy American, BABA requirements, DBE, and all other federal requirements from Ms. Amanda Carroll. As I stated today, I will be discussing a new and exciting GEFA funding source for lead service line inventories and lead service line replacement projects. GEFA has a long-standing commitment of conserving and protecting Georgia's energy, land, and water resources. As a part of this commitment, GEFA continuously invests and state and federal funding to eligible borrowers such as counties and municipalities, local water and sewer sanitary districts, some state and local authorities, some boards, political subdivisions that were created by the General Assembly, and non-governmental entities for the purpose of permanently protecting and conserving the land. Some of our water resource funding programs that we offer, there are 2 state-funded federal programs, which are the Georgia Fund and the Georgia Reservoir Fund. And there are 2 federally funded programs, which are the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Under the Georgia Fund program, eligible projects under water and sewer and stormwater, solid waste, and solar are funded. The Georgia Reservoir Funding Program is usually reserved for projects that are not eligible for CWSRF or DWSFR programs. For example, those consist of emergency loans, drinking water, economic development projects, reservoirs, dams, things of that nature. The SRF federal funds have federal requirements such as state environmental review process, Davis-Bacon wages, DBE, which is disadvantaged business enterprise, and American Iron and Steel. The SRF programs also have principal forgivable opportunities. CWSRF funds are typically sewer, stormwater, solar, land conservation projects, while the DWSRF programs fund solar and water projects, as long as the primary purpose is to facilitate compliance with national primary drinking water regulations, or to advance the public health objectives of Safe Drinking Water Act. So these are some of our programs that is offered through the GEFA fund and different funding sources. Another program that we like to talk about that's not widely known, but we want to make sure that we get the word out, is our Water First Community Program, which allows communities to work through local and state partners to increase the quality of life through wise management and protection of water resources. When you're becoming a Water First community, you demonstrate a local government's commitment to water stewardship for environmental and economic benefit. Some of the major benefits of becoming a Water First community is that you get statewide recognition for environmental stewardship. You also get a 1% interest rate reduction on GEFA loans. There's annual eligibility for community block development grants, as well as priority status for EPD 319H grant funding. So if you would like to become a Water First community, we urge you to contact our GEFA project manager, Brian Woodham. And he would definitely help you, assist you in getting and becoming a Water First community. So we wanted to touch on those different programs so that way you know what's out there and available for you. So that brings us to our first poll question of the day. Do you know that bill funding can be used to fund lead service line inventory and replacement projects? So we're going to give you about 8 seconds to answer yes or no to that first poll question.
Thank you, Lisa. And everyone should see that poll question up on their screen. You can go ahead and select between yes and no and go ahead and submit your answers.
Okay.
All right, we're just going to go ahead and close that poll.
I can't vote.
No.
Oh, wow. So those are the results. 58% said they are aware and 42% said they were not aware. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will know more about lead service line funding and how that can apply for you. So let's get into it. Lead service line funding. Are you prepared to meet the EPA deadline on October 16th? On December 16th of 2021, EPA announced a lead and copper revision that basically stated that all public and private water systems will be required to conduct and submit a lead service line inventory by October 16, 2024. GEFA recognizes that meeting this compliance may pose a hardship for a lot of communities throughout the state of Georgia. And as a result, this will be an enormous task for those communities. However, GEFA is here to help. We are here, we understand about this hardship, and we want you to know that we are here to meet your compliance needs. So how can we do so? Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, EPA has allotted GEFA $66.8 million over the next 5 years per year. This funding will be solely dedicated to assist communities with lead service line inventory and lead service line replacement projects. $66.8 million per year for the next 5 years. Wow. 49% of this money will be allocated for principal forgivable grants and loans to eligible disadvantaged communities who meet GEFA's affordability criteria. So this is how the actual lead service line funding will be allocated. So this brings us to our next poll question. Do you have an interest in obtaining funding for your lead service line inventory or replacement project? I'll give you about 8 seconds for that poll question, where you give your response. Wow, a whopping 87% say they have an interest and 13% say they did not have an interest. All right, well, those are good results. So let's talk about GEFA's funding. Under the lead service line funding, GEFA will provide 2 eligible types of funding. The first will be grants, principal forgivable grants that will only be applicable to lead service line inventory projects. The secondary funding will be affordable low interest loans that will actually be applicable to both lead service line inventory projects and lead service line replacement projects. We've received a lot of communication in regards to principal forgiveness opportunities. So the next couple of slides will actually touch on GEFA's principal forgivable criteria. Principal forgiveness. That means that as a reduction of the percentage of your total loan amount, it's not required to be paid back by the borrower. EPA appropriations determine the minimum and a maximum amount of principal forgiveness that is allocated per program per year. For the lead service line funding, we have 49% of principal forgiveness within that funding, which is the 66.8 million. Under the SRF programs, principal forgiveness is awarded to disadvantaged communities based on GEFA's affordability criteria. And I know we have received a lot of communication as to what that criteria is. So we've actually kind of outlined the criteria for assistance for disadvantaged communities. So principal forgiveness eligibility is based on an affordability score, and that is based upon median household income. It's based upon a percentage of unemployment, a percentage of not in labor force. It's also a percentage of all people within a certain income or below poverty level, a percentage with Social Security income levels, percentage with supplemental Social Security income, as well as a percentage with cash public assistance, the percentage of food stamp or SNAP benefits within that area, and any type of population change that's in accordance to census tract data or census information that has been gained for a particular area or community, as well as population. So this is the overall basis of GEFA's affordability criteria and how we are ranking for principal forgiveness for assistance for disadvantaged communities. Principal forgiveness funds will also be allocated to those projects that receive the highest score based upon the pre-application score and ranking criteria. During the annual solicitation process, which is going on right now, it started February 14th and it ends April the 14th. This will go on until all principal forgiveness is exhausted. Principal forgiveness is applied throughout the life of the construction project as percentage of the funds that is requested. So that means that that principal forgiveness goes through the life of your construction project until all your funds are used. This brings us to our poll question number 3. Will you need technical assistance in completing your inventory? We give about 8 seconds for those questions to come in, those responses. Let's see who all will be needing technical assistance. And we definitely will address the technical assistance question before this presentation is out. Give everyone a few more seconds here. Okay, so we have a response of 69% of our participants here today that said they would like to, they will need technical assistance in completing their inventory, and 31% said they did not. That is good news. That is definitely good news, because we will be offering technical assistance within the lead service line funding. So what projects are eligible? Lead service line inventories. That includes any type of field investigations. If you're doing potholing, if you're doing any type of statistical or predictive modeling to go and find your lead service lines within your communities, especially some of the older communities where homes have been here within a certain time frame. 1989 or before that 1989-1990 cutoff of the lead ban. Any type of employee interviews that you will be conducting with previous employees who may have been working on your water distribution systems, or maybe your field repair or your water service line repair crews. Any type of engineering plans or AutoCAD drawings or architectural or subdivision drawings or plans that you may have or records, intersection cards, tax maps or tax parcels. Those are all inclusive of what is an eligible project for you to get lead service line inventory funding. This is something that's really a great incentive. Lead service line will be retroactive. So what does that mean? That means if you have a lead service line project that is completed, or you have completed within the last year, or if it's ongoing right now, you're still eligible as long as you meet the federal requirements of the program. And so that is a great incentive for those communities who've already completed their inventories or already working to complete their inventories. Please go in and pre-apply so that way you can be eligible to receive the lead service line funding. Lead service line replacement projects, that's the removal and replacement of any lead or galvanized service lines, goosenecks, pigtails, connectors, curb stops, anything that's downstream of your lead service lines are eligible projects. Site restoration. It's going to take an enormous amount of work if you are actually removing your lead service lines from the street to the home. Site restorations, doing pavement cuts, any type of sod replacement, debris removal, during that time frame of removing that lead service line from the street to the home, those projects are included. They're applicable. Any type of permits or fees that you will have to acquire are also eligible. Non-routine sampling and temporary filter devices. Mr. Manny Patel is going to come and speak to you about the sampling, but actually getting those samplings, if it's not a routine practice, I know a lot of utilities have to do their normal lead and copper as an annual mandate, but with the recent lead and copper rule, if you have to do more sampling, especially for schools and daycares, that is actually an eligible amount of funding that you can receive under the lead service line replacement funding. Those costs are eligible. Any type of community engagement and public outreach activities, whether you're mailing billers out in your monthly bills, any type of town hall meetings, public education workshops where you're having to go out to the community to educate them on your replacement or going into their private spaces to complete the lead service line replacement projects, postcards or flyers, those are all applicable projects that are inclusive of the lead service line funding. So I'm trying to give you an overall aspect of how all of this is going to come together, how every part is an integral piece in getting you the necessary funding that you will need in order to be compliant when October 16th, 2024 comes along. All right, so this brings us to our final poll question on lead service line. How many water systems have started their lead service line inventory already? We're asking this because we want to know, have you started? As you know, the deadline is right around the corner, October 16, 2024. That's a little bit over a year for you to go before that compliance has to be met. And so we want to know, have you started? So we're going to give you about 8 seconds to complete your responses. Wow, 46% say they have actually completed or have started their lead service line inventories, where we've got 54% said they have not. So that brings us to our next slide. How can you pre-apply for your funding? GEFA, go to GEFA's website at gefa.georgia.gov, call for projects. We're urging all of our communities to go and pre-apply under GEFA's request for interest. We are not requiring at this time that you have to submit an engineer certification. You're pretty much able to give a ballpark estimate of what you anticipate will be your lead service line inventory costs. However, when we come back after the deadline, that's when you will need to actually have a more accurate cost for your inventory during the application process, which will come right shortly after the deadline. We've made it very easy. We understand that your time is valuable. And so we made it very quick and easy for you to pre-apply. You can simply scan our QR code that will take you directly to GEFA's request for interest pre-application. So that way you can easily apply. It takes less than maybe 10 seconds to apply. You can actually do this on your phone if you want to, or you can go on your computer, whatever is best for you. But we definitely want to make sure and urge you all to apply before the April 14th deadline. We want to make sure that GEFA is here to meet your compliance needs. If you have any questions, you can feel free to give me a call. My number is listed here, as well as my email address, as well as the QR code if you want to give that last little chance to go in and apply while I'm giving my presentation. It's simple and easy. We actually will begin prioritizing and ranking communities for funding after the April 14th deadline. So that will start immediately after that deadline on April 14th. We'll begin ranking and prioritizing communities for potential grant and loan funding. So that concludes lead service line presentation today. I hope that I provided a lot of great information for communities to be able to know more about GEFA's lead service line funding. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. I'm available to answer your call, or I should come out to your area and give a presentation to you and your stakeholders. Thank you.
Yeah, as we're transitioning from Lisa to the next speaker, we're seeing people putting good questions into the Q&A, and that's excellent because just the way time is running, we may run out of time to address all the questions on the webinar today, so we'll try to get back to you directly after. So just time is running away from us. So this is just really good content. I guess that's why.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Stacy. Our next speaker is Manny Patel. He's the Drinking Water Program Manager at Georgia EPD Watershed Protection Branch, and he'll be jumping in to share some valuable information about the lead and copper rule revisions, as well as additional details about the lead service line inventory. Manny, I see you up on the screen.
I am going to share my screen and
Just switch to the slideshow one.
there.
There you
So
go.
good afternoon, everyone. Great crowd here today. Interesting topic. My name is Manny Patel. I'm the drinking water program manager. I know we're pressed against time. I'm going to probably use all of my 25 minutes here to get to this thing. I think Lisa already did that poll question, Elena, if I'm not mistaken. I was kind of trying to gauge as to how many systems have started their lead service and inventory. It was a yes or no question.
Yes.
So for just to give a quick timeline on the lead and service line. So on just to bring everybody up to speed on timeline, I'm just going to touch just the highlights. So on January 15 of 2021, EPA published the final amended rule in the Federal Register with a March 16, 2021 effective date. And then in 2021, EPA proposed to extend the compliance date to September 16 of 2024. This was under the reconsideration under the Biden administration. So on December 16, 2021, EPA finally announced that it is considering additional changes to the rule, but not to the initial lead service line inventory portion of the rule. So essentially everything else was under consideration except the lead service line inventory, as Lisa had alluded in her slides. As of August of 2022, EPA finally did release the guidance for developing and maintaining a service line inventory. So EPA plans to propose the lead and copper rule improvements. We're going to call it LCRI in fall of 2023. And EPA anticipates finalizing the forthcoming LCRI prior to October 16, 2024, which was initial compliance date in the lead and copper rule revisions. So just want to again remind everybody the deadline to submit a service line inventory still remains at October 16, 2024. So regardless of what you've heard, that deadline is still there. It's not going away. Okay, so who needs to do one? So all community and non-community, all community and non-transient, non-community water system must submit a service line inventory to Georgia EPD on or before October 16th of 2024. So all service lines, regardless of classification, must be included. If all service lines have been identified as non-lead, an initial inventory still must be submitted. And then that inventory that you submit on October 16, 2024 will be updated on July 1 of each year for the next maybe 10 to 15 years, depending on the replacement schedule that EPA is going to promulgate. The service line inventory must be publicly available by all water systems. Systems that serve over 50,000 people must make the inventory available online, not 50,000 connection. I want to make sure there was a misunderstanding at one point. Is system that serve 50,000 customers must make the inventory online. Consumer credit reports, CCR, must indicate where customers can find their service line inventory. Water system must provide notifications to persons served with a service connection that is considered to be lead, and the definition of it is actually lead, or a galvanized line requiring replacement, or a lead status unknown, within 30 days of submitting their service and inventory. So October 16, 2024, you're going to submit an inventory, and then within 30 days, you're going to notify all the customers that either have a lead or a galvanized requiring replacement or a lead status unknown, that they have a service line that is classified as lead. So this is just a quick overview as to, probably have seen this chart. Most water system folks are very familiar with this. So there's your water main, you connect it, there's a water meter, and then it goes to the house. The water meter could be on this side of the sidewalk or this side of the sidewalk. Regardless, a portion of the line that is water system owned, and there's a portion of the line that is customer owned. So when we say system owned line, is basically from water main up to the meter, and then from meter on to the house is the customer owned portion of the line. So in the inventory, in a sense, you're going to have location information. You're going to have water system owned portions classification and what was the basis of the classification. Customer owned portion classification and what was the basis of that classification. And then overall service line material classification. Item number 5, 6, and 7 are just something that you're going to help in your future monitoring efforts. So is we're going to have a calculate your tiers for monitoring purposes. We definitely like to know if the service line is connected to the school or a childcare. This is required for tier monitoring, and this will also help you with your replacement, the sampling requirements for school. And the last one is the notice requirement, so you can keep a track if the customer's been notified or not. So each service line must have a unique location identifier. Service line address must be submitted on the SLI. When I say SLI, so service line inventory, to Georgia EPD. A secondary location identifier may be used in place of the service line address in the SLI made available to the public by the water system. So if you don't want to disclose exact 123 Main Street, the law allows you to displace just a street name or a block number or intersection or GPS coordinates. In addition to unique location identifier, a unique service line ID for each service line is recommended to track and reference service line. We recommend that you use a number or a sequential system. So this essentially is a picture or representation of the previous slide. So you got your service line ID. This could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A1, A2, and so on. Actual street address that is required to submit it to the EPD. And then if you choose to, you can still use actual street address, or you can use the qualifiers that I just talked about, which is the intersection or just a street name or GPS coordinates. So each service line must have a service line classification for both the water system owned portion and the customer owned portion. The classification of each portion will determine the overall service line classification. On the water system owned portion side, you basically either is non-lead, that you're sure that it's not lead, it was installed after the lead band-aid, for example, or it is lead, or a lead status unknown.
Well,
On the customer owned portion side, you got, can somebody mute their mic, please? On the customer owned side, you got non-lead, lead status unknown, galvanized requiring replacement, or galvanized not requiring replacement. We've added this. If you already done the work to figure out whether your galvanized requires replacement or does not require replacement, might as well track it so you have it for future inventory purposes, for planning purposes. Again, it's not required by law. The law just says galvanized requiring replacement or lead status unknown, but we want to give that option. We think it's a better option in terms of complete overall status of your inventory. We highly recommend water system include additional information in specific service line material. If you know if it's copper, if you know if it's plastic, or if it's PVC, whatever it is, you can include those in the inventory. So this is just a quick definition of what each line is. So lead is basically any portion of the service line is known to be made of lead. All of this definition is straight coming out of the guidance document that EPA just published in August. Galvanized line requiring replacement is a service line that is not actually made of lead, but a portion is galvanized, and the system is unable to demonstrate that the galvanized line was never downstream of a lead service line. Galvanized not requiring replacement. This is again state-only definition. The service line is not made of lead, and it does not require replacement because it was never downstream of a lead service line. Non-lead, obviously, all portion of the lead service line, all portion of the service lines are not known to be lead, or they are not galvanized requiring replacement. through an evidence-based record, methods, or techniques. How did you come to that conclusion? Lead status unknown is basically you don't know what it is at this point. As far as how can you do your basis of material classification? This is what we call investigation methods. Water system must identify the basis of material classification for each service line and make supporting document available to EPD upon request. You'll keep those in there. So how can you, what's your basis? So we just, you could have an interview with an operator that installed the line or still working there and has knowledge of, or has been retired, but that has the knowledge of what those lines were. You could look at historical documentation. You could do some evacuation or potholing around the meters. You could consider sequencing sampling, predictive modeling, visual inspections, or a combination of these methods. Also, you can do customer identification. Some water systems do that, or any other method that you have used that is not listed above, you can write that in. Highly recommend water system include additional information on the method used, including specific notes and details that may support classification. The more specific the information that is included, the higher the potential of less work down the road. Try to be as complete and accurate as you can, because as I said, you're going to do an annual update to the inventory. If you're going to do an interviews, we highly recommend the name and qualification of the interviews are recorded. Highly recommend a subset of verifications are conducted to confirm the information. In other words, if the operator said, I don't have a recollection of we ever using lead in the subdivision, go out there and do some field verification to verify that information. Sequencing sampling, the water system must supply documentation to Georgia EPD outlining the criteria used to classify service line and justification for its use. What will be considered lead versus non-lead? This is basically what is the threshold. Is 3 ppm your threshold, 5 ppm? And then how did you establish the threshold? What liter sample will be tested? Are you going to do a 3 liter, 5 liter, 1st liter, or a composite? Does this approach vary depending on the service line length? So as you know, houses could have a different length, driveway length and service line. Highly recommend samples are collected by, if you do go this approach, we highly recommend that samples are collected by the water system and not by the customers for the quality of data purposes. We also highly recommend a certified drinking water lab is used to analyze your samples. Your lab is certified to do lead and copper, which I don't think any labs are, but if it is, then you can use that. Predictive modeling here, the water system must supply documentation to Georgia EPD outlining the criteria used to classify service lines and justification for its use. Verification must be complete, and the data is needed to establish the model. 90% confidence threshold or higher, we might even push that up to 95. We're currently in the process of thinking that over. This, I want to put a caution out that this cannot be the only approach you use. You have to use all the other approaches prior to going to a predictive modeling. This is basically, in my opinion, best to use it for the service and inventories that you have no clues about after doing the rest of the investigation. You do not want to start off right off the bat with predictive modeling. So this is what it's going to look like. Again, water system is going to put their criteria for what that is. And the same info and what was the basis of that? It was interview, hot holding, evacuation. That's going to be dropped down. And then if you did interview, it was John Smith, class 1 operator from whatever date, contractor records or sampling, and all sample records were below the threshold. And then the same information is repeated on the customer own side. So they're basically the same thing. You're going to do the same thing on your side, and then you're going to repeat the same information on the customer side. Service line installation date. If documentation can be provided, service line installed on or after January 1, 1990 can be considered non-lead based on the effective date of the federal or the state lead ban. The federal state lead ban was went in effect on June 19 of 1988. The state adopted regulations in 88 with an effective date of 89. So, but if you want to use, we're giving an extra time there so that the use of the inventories or the system or finish of the projects that were already approved in some stages of completion. Water system must report the installation date for each service line if known. At a minimum, water system must include pre-1990, post-1990 or unnamed It is highly recommended water system write in the exact date if you happen to have that information. Service line diameter, again, it is recommended water system identify in record the service line diameter to assist in material classification. Most lead service lines have a diameter of 2 inches or less. That is why it's important to capture this data. If a lead service line is identified as being larger than 2 inches, service line diameter should no longer be used to identify service line classification. That's been the general consensus that most of the lead service lines were 2 inches or less. So it helps in doing inventory. If you see a line out there that's 4 inches, but you can't tell the material, you can safely say it's not lead. Connectors, it is recommended system identify and record the presence of lead connectors such as pigtails and goodness. They're not required, but it is recommended you do it so you can figure out where they are, and so you can replace them as time goes on. Connectors are not considered part of the service line. We recommend lead connectors are replaced when identified. Then connectors over 24 inches are considered to be service line and must meet the requirements of the lead and copper rule requirements. So basically, you're going to capture the information, whether it's pre-1990, post-1990, or actual date, or sometimes in 1990, if you know it, or a period, whatever the case might be, under or over 2 inches or actual diameter if known. And then the presence of lead connector, again, this is not required. Again, we highly recommend it to do it. And you can do the same information carry over on the customer side. So it's a duplicate information for the water system side and the same information for the customer side. And overall service line classification must be reported to Georgia EPD based on the water system owned portion line classification and the customer owned service line classification. The overall classification is considered. I'm actually going to advance to the next slide, which will probably show you better. So if, for example, if you have a system side is lead, customer side is lead, then it overall is lead, obviously. If a system side is lead and the customer side is galvanized requiring replacement, GRR, then it is lead. If a system side is lead and the water system and the customer side is non-lead, the overall classification is still lead. So this chart is there on the EPA's guidance document and will be included in our guidance document as well. This is again straight coming out. So this is going to figure out what the overall classification is and what you report to, what we report to EPA is this overall classification of the entire service line. So this is a permutation and combination that basically do it. In short, if you got lead on either the customers on the system owned side, if you got lead, galvanized requiring replacement or lead status unknown on either side, it's basically considered lead. Easiest way to remember it. So that's the information that I just showed in the graph in the table earlier. So you're just going to use document whether it's lead, non-lead, lead status unknown for the customer side, for the water system side, and then the customer side, and then overall material classification will be calculated based on that chart that I just showed you. So for example, non-lead, then overall is non-lead. If it's a lead, non-lead, then overall is lead. So this is required for each service line. Lead tape monitoring 3 years. Again, this I said, this is not going to come into play until the inventory is done, but the LCR sample side used for routine tap monitoring are broken down into 5 tiers. Sample tiers, again, are based on overall service classification that we just talked about, building type, and the water system type. Water system must enter the building type connected to each service line in the inventory. The building type is basically non-residential, single family, or multifamily. Georgia EPD lead and copper rule initial service line inventory should identify service line tier classification based on overall classification and building type. So this is the logic out there for tiers. Again, this chart will be in our guidance document. It's straight coming out of the regs, and we will have this available so that we can assist you in the monitoring phase, and that's going to follow the inventory. Once the inventory is done, the monitoring is going to trigger. I think it's January 1 of 2025. We're waiting for clearance from EPA if that's going to shift in the upcoming lead and copper rule improvements that EPA is going to propose in fall. But as of based on the old rules, starting January 1 of 2025, you got to start doing your monitoring. And so that's why we need this information to be captured. So we need the overall material classification and what building type it is, so you can figure out which one of the tiers that you fall in, or depending on your water systems, that community water system and the non-transient non-community water system. We're doing good on time. I've got about 5 minutes left. So this is what the overall classification is going to look. This is one that you already entered. Again, you're going to enter the building type. This is required so we can do the tier classification for you. This will help you so you don't have to sit down and try to take the chart that I just showed you and trying to figure out which tier it is. If you do the inventory correctly, the spreadsheet will populate and let you know what tier classification it falls under. As you know, special testing is required for schools. So 20% of identified schools and licensed childcare facilities must be tested per year. So that's, we have to complete that in a total of 5 years. 3 trees for reducing lead in drinking water for school and licensed childcare facilities is testing, training, and taking action. That's part of the rules, which I don't think is going to change. Water system must identify any schools or childcare facilities on the service and inventory. You saw that drop-down menu where we're trying to pick those up as schools. Elementary schools are defined as pre-K and above, but not to exceed 8th grade. So those are the schools. It does not include high school. It just includes all the elementary schools, middle school, and all your licensed childcare and daycare childcare facilities. So that's the drop down. You're going to see yes, daycare, yes, school, or no. We're trying to capture that information for you. So that will help you then get a list of which service lines you have that are tied with the daycare or a school, so you can put them on your 20% schedule. Water system notification requirements. So water system must provide notification to persons served with a service connection considered to be lead. Again, that definition being lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or lead status unknown. They're all considered lead within 30 days of submitting their service line inventory. If a location identified different from the street address is used, the provided consumer notice must contain the location identifier. So if you're using the location identifier like 20 Main Street or just Main Street, you need to do that. You also must provide opportunities to replace lead service lines and or opportunities to verify the unknown service lines. The LCRR and EPA guidance for developing and maintaining a service line inventory do not identify restrictions on consumer notice methods. In other words, you don't have to just do it by the old style. You can do it by mail or by any method approved by the state. If you have an electronic billing system that most customers get the bills from, you can use that as well. That's still pending on the finalization of the consumer confidence rule. Finalization of consumer documentation. It's going to spell out more in the LCRI. It's going to come out more. Water system must provide a copy of the consumer notice and information materials to Georgia EPD by July 1 each year for the previous calendar year. This is when every year, not with the initial inventory, but every year you have to provide documentation that you have notified every customer that has a lead service line. Water system can use the spreadsheet that I just talked about in tracking those notices. Service line replacement. Lead service line replacement will be mandatory based on the criteria dictated in the lead and copper rule improvements. Full lead service line replacement is required to be counted in the replacement schedule. And the bill funding requires, if you apply for the bill funding that GEFA just talked about, it requires full line replacement. The water system own line and the customer own line. Water system can use the spreadsheet to tag the replacement schedule. So here is our spreadsheet where you can, again, this is not mandatory, but we're trying to give as many tools as we can to track your replacement. Submission to the EPD will be through an electronic submission via a cloud-based software for the initial inventory. Inventory updates each year will be completed on the same software. The goal of software is to act as a tool for water system to track inventories, replacement, and consumer notices. EPD and GEFA are currently in the process For finalizing the procurement, and we should have the software available for use by summer of 2023. There are other few possible features in the software that we'll consider in the future. So we went through a rulemaking process. Basically, all we did is added a rule that says the inventory that is due October 16, 2024 is going to be submitted in electronic format prescribed by the director. So what's next? The spreadsheet to be released in the coming week or two. We're almost done. We should be releasing that very, very shortly. The guidance material that goes along with the spreadsheet will be released before the end of this month is our goal. The software, we're looking at about summer 2023. We're going to also be presenting at conferences on requirements of the service line inventory and guidance on completing the service line inventory. Obviously, we're going to be doing drinking water community feedback. Lead and copper rule looks like it's going to come out the improvement is going to come out in summer or fall of 2023 if EPA stays on target. And start your service line inventories as soon as possible if you haven't started already. I saw that the poll that we just did in the previous presentation that gives me good confidence that we'll get to the finish line by October 16, 2024. With that, that's my information on the slide. Again, my name is Manny Patel. That's my contact information. You can also reach out to Sean. Sean's my drinking water compliance manager. Some of you guys have already dealt with him, and that's Sean's information as well. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to the group.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Manny, for sharing such great information. We have a lot of questions and not much time. So let's jump right in. And, if we need to stay over just a few minutes, maybe we can accommodate that just to get through a few of these. So a question for Manny. What portion of the customer side must we replace, or has the state decided on this just yet?
You have to replace the entire customer side all the way up to the connection to the house.
Awesome. And I just want to make sure that everyone is understanding that it is the entire service line, customer side and utility side. What was the software selected by Georgia EPD for tracking lead service line inventory?
So we are in the process of procuring the software right now, and we should be completing the procurement process in the upcoming weeks. So at this point, we don't have the liberty to disclose that information since we're in the procurement process.
So just keep your eyes and ears open
Yep.
for when it launches. Awesome. Lisa, how soon do you expect to announce funding after the scoring has completed?
We're going to begin ranking the communities immediately after the deadline, April 14th deadline, and hopefully we can start having communication out to the communities by June or July. That is the tentative plan, to have that communication out with them. But I have actually started getting a lot of pre-applications in and start prioritizing and ranking those communities already.
So
there's a couple of other good questions in there, Lynn, I think it would be helpful to answer for the general audience. So there's a question here is, if the customer portion of the line is lead, who pays for lead line replacement, the customer or the property owner? Where do these private citizens get funding for the lead line replacement project? Great question. First of all, as I said earlier, to get the replacement credit, it has to be done completely. The water system is not responsible for replacing the customer side. The customer is. However, if you use bill funding, you have to replace the entire line. And that's what the intent of the bill funding is, to pay for the customer side as well. But this is a message I've been hammering. You need to be talking to your city managers, your mayors, because how are you going to incentivize the customer to replacement? Are you going to be providing some kind of grants or some kind of funding or a rate tier adjustment? These are the questions that needs to be addressed at a higher level than the water system level. It's very, very important that that dialogue start now. Otherwise, you're going to be facing the same questions again. Is sampling required for schools after 1995? No. Can you use the home build? Again, sorry, I'm jumping to this question, but I think these are good, important questions that we can answer. Can you use the year built or home age after 1990 to classify service line as lead? Absolutely. That's what we recommend that you start.
Let me jump in real quick.
Sure.
Lisa, one of the questions is, what is the site that we need to go to apply for loan assistance? Would you be able to drop that in the chat for everyone? That way everyone has that without us just repeating it online.
I'll drop it right now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Perfect.
Also, we want to make sure we address the technical assistance. We are working, of course, EPD is our longstanding partner, but we're also working with Georgia Rural Water to provide technical assistance for a lot of communities, especially those communities that are less than 10,000 in population, or communities that have under 300 service connections. So we will be working with Georgia Rural Water to provide technical assistance to help a lot of communities who are needing technical assistance.
Manny, I think this is a good question for you. Can you use year built or home age after 1990 to classify service lines as non-lead, or do you need the service line installation date?
No, that you could use the home build date after January 1 of 1990 to classify them as non-lead. Because that, like I said earlier, the ban went into effect in 88. So the couple of years buffer will be great. There's also a couple of last two questions in here that should be good for everybody. If you don't mind, let me answer those. Is school lead service line replacement based on overall service line criteria? For example, if the customer portion is non-lead, i.e. copper, will this portion need to be replaced with the lead system side to comply with full lead service line replacement? No. You're only going to replace what's lead. If the customer side is copper, you don't need to do that. You can leave that alone. Is sampling required for school build after 1990? Yes, all schools, regardless of their build date, have to be sampled. Does the government have to absorb the cost to replace their customer portion? Again, this is the question that you need to be talking to your utility directors, the mayors and the councilmen, is how are you going to assist in doing it? Without that one, you do not get a full credit. What are the consequences if the system do not meet October 16, 2024 deadline? First of all, you do not want to do that, because if you do that, all the lines are considered lead. So in other words, you'll have to inform every customer in your water system that their line is lead, even though it might not be the case. Second thing, you're going to be looking at enforcement action from EPD. And we'll be looking at consent orders as well. So this is obviously a message that you do not want to give to your customers. The customers are going to say, why didn't you do my inventory? You knew this ahead of time. This had to be done. So if you're thinking about, oh, I'm just going to put everything unknown and just submit it, guess what? Everything unknown is considered lead. And you're going to be providing notices to the customers, and then providing the point of use filters until you figure out what those lines are. So there's a very big cost of compliance if you think you couldn't just put just unknown and submit the inventory and be done. That's not the way you want to go.
Benny, where can everyone find the spreadsheet that you were sharing, or how to input that information?
Right. So the spreadsheet that I was sharing to you, we're, like I said in my last slide, we're putting the final touches on the spreadsheet, and we're going to release the spreadsheet along with the guidance document, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week. It's going to be on EPD's drinking water page. So just be on the lookout for EPD's drinking water page. Like I said, we're trying to get it hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week. And we'll also send out a notice to GRWA, GAWP, and we have about 4,000 subscribers on our notice list as well. We're going to subscribe. We're going to send out a push out a notice as well. So we'll do a broad push to make sure everybody's informed.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarifying question as we're wrapping up here. We're not required to change all galvanized lines if there is no lead attached to it, correct?
No, you do not have to change galvanized line if there's no lead attached to it. That is correct.
All right. If a municipality has replaced a percentage of service lines due to an exceedance and unknowns are included in that percentage, what happens when they go to replace a line and find that it's non-lead? Does that count as a replacement?
No, it does not count. You can only take credit for lead service line replacement. That's why it is very important to have your inventory as accurate as possible. And that's why I cannot stress again that you cannot just put unknown and skip by.
Awesome, awesome. Now, we did make sure that we shared Manny and Lisa's contact information. So if there's anything that, questions that are still burning that you need answers to, please feel free to reach out via email. They did share that contact information. But the recording for this webinar, I did add to the chat the link where you will be able to find the recording for this webinar. And you will also be able to find the recording for the first webinar that took place last month. As a last highlight, there is a third webinar coming up at the end of next month on April 25th, same time. Please click the link or use the QR code to register. This topic will focus on financing emerging contaminant projects in Georgia. So I want to, again, thank you all for being able to join us. Thank you, Manny and Lisa, for sharing such great information. And we appreciate you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.